Good afternoon and welcome to the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement Conference 2016. At this point, we're going to be hearing from Karen Elkins. Karen is the editor and producer of Science to Sage magazine. She creates a visual tapestry, and she's going to be presenting lots of visuals and pictures of what we've been talking about here up to this point. She combines ancient religion with modern science. Joining her will be David Enke, who you've been actually hearing some of his music with his amazing musical instruments. He has open source studios, which assists inventors to actually create and get their products out to where they need to go. He also creates electronic sensors, piezoelectric sensors, which we can use to measure some of the phenomena that we've been talking up to this point. So without further ado, David and Karen.
Wow. Thank you, everybody. I think this will be fun because I have the visuals to sort of solidify a lot of what a lot of people have been talking about to this point. I have the privileges of doing Science to Sage magazine, which has been my passion, and it has been my question as a child. And the question was, how does God create? I always wanted to go to the designer universe when I passed on. What I didn't realize is that I have the perfect opportunity to do that by having an inquiring mind, as some people have said, just ask and you shall receive. So through the magazine, I've had the course of meeting some pretty remarkable people. And when Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's a world-famous water expert at the University of Washington, and he said to me one day, there were only 3 things that we need to create anything, and he says it's light, molecules, and water. And I see this at NASA, and I go, wow, that's really cool, that's great, that makes sense, because all it is pure chemistry and alchemy, and it's atomic structures vibrating into form. And that makes it pretty simple. When we look at what we've talked about with ether a lot today, etheric, the cosmic ether, to me, is there is no other substance whatsoever, as Keeley says, that is not made from it. You can see the same structures in the human cells to the cosmic cells. And we are stardust to Earth's crust. We are nothing but particles of light in the wave. So when we look at that, and we look at Walter's work and Albert Einstein's work, and the secret is the wave is the creation. So we're talking about vortexes. This is where it comes from. So for my friend John Depew, which is the reason I'm here, is he says, Karen, you're almost done with your book, and you have over 60 scientists in it, and that's why you'll be able to see the visuals that you do, is because when I do the magazine, and I've invested my time, but you'll see things you've never seen before, because the magazine attracts. It's not a peer-reviewed magazine, it's something that is for innovative thinkers, and I look for where things actually bridge. So 3 things make everything, and for him it's the magnetic current in the middle, that when you see spin, but it's still prisms of light that form information. So simply, these 2 currents will blossom into glorious complexity that becomes the blueprint of the universe. That's my buddy John Depew. And what you see is the whole notion of what is 3. Here is from Steve Ross, where this is like from the nemascope, which was a finer form than even the Rife machine, showing atoms in structures of 3s. This is from George from Austria. He was an electrician. I find electricians and musicians are what I call the genius of the planet in a lot of ways, because they seem to understand the vibrational nature of our universe. And there's your structure of water. And then when you look again, you look at the prism for light, which is also structures of 3. So if you would look at the esoteric teachings, there's your laws of triangles, 3, 6, and 9s. That's just for beginnings of when we actually are exploring the concept of 3. So again, when we look at Dale Pond, who explored Keeley's and Walter Russell's work, it's 3s and 3s and 3s. All it is molecular structures getting to finer forms of vibrating bundles of energy. Then you have Wes Marion talks about when you look at water, all it does is these hexagonal structures. And when you look at cascading ions, it fires in the same sort of electrical discharge system, which is fractal, again, in 3s. Then we look at the 3 states that Pollack is talking about. And this is where we start looking at those esoteric teachings as where does something but everybody calls oneness. And I think, well, what does oneness really mean? When we look at the elements, which is what we're all constructed of, we see that fire, air, water is still plasma, gases, and liquids, and that is the basic primordial soup for all of creation, from planets to plants to people. When we look at what makes water, as it's been said earlier today, what makes water is hydrogen and oxygen. We're basically talking about, think about volcanoes, what's there? Aquifers and geysers, what's with thunderstorms create water. So out of electricity, what we're talking about is different phases. So water is the engine and the medium and the matrix that actually moves lives. It carries charge, information, and light. And you can see the work there that shows it through this, it was called the bridge experiment, where this was water transferring across a beacon. And you can see water literally moving in these vortexes with the thunder. So what I got to the point was I thought, oh my God, this is nature's recycling system, because it's going from one phase of one thing to the next. So we're rhythmic balance of exchange, and you start looking at ancient symbols and you begin to see that they understood that. We don't understand it quite in that way. But what is the engine that moves life? It's vortexes. And it is the workhorse of all of the things that you see. So here's the work of, most of you might know the work of Walter Russell. And these octaves that he has show the transfer of universal constant of energy. You can see the, on both from Len Murray's work up there, the periodic table flowing in the Mobius forms. It's a continuous Mobius of, from Walter Russell's work. My friend Gene Webb says, from the alphanon to the omeganon, what we're really looking at is cyclical patterns of elements, recycling, always recycling. We are talking life without end. Oops, let me go back one. Let me go back. If we look at the ancient symbols, we're looking at what I thought was really interesting when I was looking for images. This right here is the sun beaming on a window, particleizing to crystallizing. So all is manifest and filled with God. All is unmanifest is filled with God. And I thought, how can that be? And the only thing that comes to me is, what is it? That we're all basically part of those elements structuring of life. And where the ancients knew it was this. If you look, here's the fire, the particles, the water, the Georgie, which is nothing but an electromagnetic spectrum, with the bell vibrating. So we have the electromagnetic spectrum and the field of vibration. You can see it also here in the old symbols in the Bible. There seemed to be a time when they knew that its spirit, the elements, were fundamental and elementals. That seemed to be something that I think we've sort of forgotten. So this is where, if you look at the ancients, their fire, their particles, and your water, your brain is 90% water. Which is what you'll see as holds the memory. The genius is the bridge between man and God. He will unlock the doors to ecstasy. I just think that's true. When we all have our own little downloads and we get our moments of inspiration, we can, it's inspiration, insights, and intuition, and then we can ohm home. I think it's kind of fun. So we are the living waters. They listened silently to the water, which was not just water, but the voice of life, the voice of being, the voice of perpetual becoming. So we are basically incubated in water. We are basically 99% water at a molecular level, and we arrived as beings. We are the virtual marine aquarium, and we actually have to think, where does most of our water or oxygen on the planet come from? And it's water. And then the question is, when we start looking at that elemental and fundamental parts, the question is, are particles of light, like pixels on your TV set, what appears to be solid, which we know that we are nothing but particles, we are basically orchestrating them in our own standing container, like a TV container is nothing like a standing box, us being a standing wave, attracting and dialing channels based on sympathetic vibrations. So here we go. Picture is an electromagnetic signal. The signal originates outside the TV set, and we are basically the intermediary. What's the purpose of a TV? What is the purpose of our life? The purpose of our life is we're all basically a storytelling. We basically have something we're here to learn and to explore. When I worked with children for years, it's, do you see me? Do you understand me? And why am I here? I'm here to explore, I'm here to create, and I'm here to be. So you get to be plugged in and charged. Our fire is where our fire is the spiritual order of vibration. It is our desire to be. And what makes us fire is our breath and our oxygen and the words that we actually breathe and take in and speak out. So when we look at the elements, air breathes me, water bathes me, fire warms me, earth grounds me, space expands me. And without these elemental aspects, we would not be able to really experience life at all. It's the gift of life itself. So when we look at the structure of water, when we look at Dr. Emoto's work, we still have to look at the sort of fractal nature of it. So in the beginning was the Word. And if you look at the beginning part of the snowflake, it's still pyramids. And it's fractal in nature. So this fractal aspect, again, has that cascading fractal aspect of what we're looking at. And it, again, begins to make mountains, begins to make order. And as Plato said, triangles are what creates everything. So out of this, you look at the ancient wisdom, and there's a threefold nature. I love what Tesla said, what one man calls God, another calls the law of physics. So when we look at this is from the 13th century. I mean, how did they figure that out? So they actively knew that God was the geometer. We look at three-dimensional time. And then we go into the wisdom of our old teachers here, which is Leonardo. Everything is energy and everything vibrates. So how do we understand this? When we look at the harmonic grid that flowers life, we realize that everything is basically geometry in motion. I am that which cannot be measured or known, but I reveal myself as I wish in these structures and forms of geometry. There we go, and you can see that these patterns seem to have been ubiquitous. They are everywhere on this planet. This is from the Vatican to the Turkish mosque to China to the old dream catcher, which is when you look at it from that perspective, isn't that beautiful? That it's the dreams that we catch, it's the stories we tell that actually really count in this vibrational universe. There's where fields of information form in forms. And this is when we begin to understand the nature of life itself. And I love this quote. The first piece, which is the most important, is that which comes from within the soul of people when they realize their relationship, their oneness with the universe and all its power, and when they realize at the center of the universe dwells the Great Spirit, and that is the center is everywhere, and truthfully, it's in every one of us. And I'll show you how that goes as we go along. When we look at the old Chinese pear here, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the prism of light. You're going to see the magnetic currents. Right here is the torus field. Here you see the atoms and particles to light. You see the seed of the fruit, which I'll explain to you later. These are think of these as magnetic filings where there's a law of attraction and action. So again, here you have the magnetic currents. So here goes back to John Depew's work. Here's again the spin of the prism of light, spinning fields of information. So art, I love it. Art as fact, not just artifact. We are looking at art as fact. And that's part of the secret of the universe from John's perspective, and I kind of understand. Right here is the magnetic curve in the cup. Here is the chalice that holds the flower, which all that holds life. You can see it in the ancients, where again, it's still bringing spin. This divine template is the complete formula and blueprint of magnetic energies. It should be considered the true Da Vinci Code. It's the sacred geometry representing two individual magnetic currents and the neutral particles of matter. The chalice is the container that holds life. Again, it's part of the esoteric teachings. You can see it as the yin and the yang, and the female and the male. You also see it as the structure of all of that we are. Here is where we can look at it from a very scientific point of view, if you want to go that way, where you see the sperm implanting its own seed into a sphere to the pine cone. And it's a perfect analogy because oftentimes people use the pine cone as the pineal gland to show you that there's something in these vortex patterns. This right here is your seed of life. This is a sound wave, and this is a magnetic current. So I love what Walter Russell says, all form are waveforms, and all waveforms unfold from seed records of the waveforms. So, after a while you go, wow, okay. So here's your pyramidal structure. things that are spinning, and here's how it spins out. So we have a pyramid scheme for life, not just from the pyramids, but just life itself. You can see here when we're talking about the magnetic currents that have showed up many times during today, you can see it's heart-centered. I think that's kind of fun because you can see that here, but it unfolds the ear, the fetus, galaxies, the eyes. So the gold, I call this this is the golden thread that weaves phi, which weaves life, which weaves all of creation, because spin is vital. And there we go. Then you wonder why it was so important in ancient times to look at this, because it was the magnetic current. And these were, nodal points where things would unfold in a particular sequence. And that's revealing the ancient magnetic wave and particle distribution, the principles that we're looking at. Again, magnetic filings, we wonder how life attracts itself, why these were so important. Pyramidal structures seem to have a way of... when I did an article, I did an issue called The Science of Sound, and with Stuart Mitchell, he basically said that the pyramids, you could see them resonating, and he had diagrams showing how they resonate out, like the reason that the Egyptians called it the bees, they were the bees. This was because the queen bee resonated to the hive, and so this is how this works. This is how they were, why we had that in ancient times. This is the World Wide Web. This is the neck. I love this aspect because we do come connected one way or another. We only fall apart from our own so we can create our own dynamic creation and our own seed. You can see this in waveform functions. Right here, you get a speaker tomorrow, which is Marco Rode, and this is based on his work, where you can see how when the frequencies unfold depending on their rates, you can see how their sound is the underpinning of all creation, vibration. This is the work of John Stuart Reid up here with his cymoscope, and I think it's miraculous, if you ask me. There you go, wave disturbance. You can see here's from the cymoscope to the real life thing. We are part of this endless sea, and we're playing our parts in life. This is the work of Richard Merrick, who's done the interference theory, which you'll see a little bit more through, but the harm is really Darwin, right? No, and actually Darwin's last book was not anything but his last book was called The Theory of Love. And I think when we actually look to what we should be looking at is we grow in accordance to vibrations, which has a lot to do with how we think and how we speak. And there's your organic chemistry based on our reason to be. By the work of Don Estes, he works with a lot of water and sound. I love the idea that it's form and formless, but he said to me, Karen, you ever noticed that water is made of hydrogen and oxygen? And by looking at that, why is it holds all the resonance? Why does it hold all the energies? Why does it do what it do? And we go back to the elements, and we're liquids, solids, and gases, basically going from one form to the next. So this is based on the work of Dr. Wei Min Ho and her book, The Living Rainbow. And you will see all of these amazing pictures that she photographed in the microscope. I think she passed on this year. But her work, it's not so bizarre when you think about it. There's the E8 theory of everything, materialized down into crystalline form. So as Walter Russell says, all matter is crystalline. All matter is frozen light. There you go. Based on the work of... up here, Dr. Gerald Pollack, he came up with the idea of the fourth phase of water. He witnessed it over the time working with a lot of his students. And what I think is interesting, we're talking about the torus field. And when we talk about the torus field, here's the notion of time. Here's how graphing creates. So we're beginning to see the same structures in living systems over and over and over again. And I just want to tell you, this is water. This is George's work. And they look like people, they look like horses, they look like flying machines. So water and carbon-12 create endless chains of sticky amino acids capable of crystallizing life into form. I call it the information highway. So when we look at how water has memory, this is also the work of George showing us, here's spa water, mineral water, and this came from the holy water of a well somewhere in England. And you wonder why water makes things new, because it has a resonant field. It holds the information of what's around it. And here's tap water from around the world. And so when people think, well, what is structured water? Well, this is the structure that you're actually consuming that is actually filtering through the very soul of your being, vibrating through you. So you might be conscious of, some of these vortex machines, because here's the difference. There's a company that I know of called Crystal Blue, and they've structured water. They've put a lot of the minerals and the crystals and things in their vortexing machines. And here's the result of the before one and then the other. I mean, it's when we are mimicking nature's design, we do something really great. When we quit messing with it and thinking that we're all so brilliant. I always say that maybe God had a better design and his has been tested for millions and billions of years. So here's what I said to myself after thinking about this. I have the solution of the universe that rushes through me. It holds my memories. It's the tape recorder that's embedded in me, recording my words, my thoughts, and then it plays them back to me. I have a choice to what waters I swim in, the words I let sink in, and the words I send. The loving word is the only solution that brings a resolution and the peace within. When I look at here as John Stewart reads work, and what he says, here it is inside the bubble of what we speak. So here's the A, E, I, O, and U of you, basically atomic bubble structures bonded harmonically. And then when we oftentimes look at waves, we never really generally look at this part. We never just do this. I think it's interesting. We're always looking at waves like this, but what is it happens when we slice it? And when we slice it, we actually begin to see what flowers our own life, our own DNA, our own patterns here. And so here's the reading of the DNA. So the DNA music has been developed since the early 1970s, when geneticists found it was easier to read the lines, strands of DNA coded by the pitch of a 22 amino acid. So again, just to see that life is beautiful, and we are constantly flowering life. Here is the piano notes. So when I always think of the words, the universe, it is but one song with many notes. And so again, what's holding it, it's the vibration of water. Stuart Mitchell was one of these gentlemen who had, with his father, decoded the Rosalind Chapel that was in the movie at the end of the Da Vinci Code. And I loved it. Our first cry is the instant we become a member of a harmony of a universal symphony. This is our purpose for existing, is to be the vibration of song, thought, and the accompanying emotions that springs from the universal void. And if you don't think we're coming from the universal void, we'll think again. You actually can see how the patterns of the planets actually play out. They also have a harmonic signature. This is the work of Richard Merrick, again, showing how the planets have that ear. So everything that we do in this universe, we have an ear for, a song for. We're actually made for it. The universe is made for its song. There's a spiral connection that connects us all. So here is the work of John Stuart Mitchell, and right here you'll see these are different planets, and you'll see that they have their own vibrating signature. We're basically sonic chambers reverberating, affecting each other. So if we don't think we are, we'll think again. Here's the, up there, you can see, that's Jupiter. And when you actually go to the NASA website, it will tell you that it sounds like a Gregorian chant. And that all these different shapes have different frequencies. So if we go to the Rosalind Chapel, it's our job to remember that we're really a member of this cosmic organism, which is called the entire universe, that we're all resonating together in a common sound. And the ancients knew this. So when you go to the Rosalind Chapel, what Stuart Mitchell did is realize that these were sound glyphs, and where they had gotten the information for that making was not from the Templars, but from the Chinese. So they did circumnavigate, they did get around a long time before. There's corn structures in here. There's Vedic designs of ancient temples in the Rosalind Chapel before you even think that it would have. So it's actually quite an invitation to become a remember and to become a member of a cosmic place. Here's hydrogen wave functions. You can see it that the East had it all over. And this is probably, the secret of everything. It's the cosmic gateway to understanding the nature of our universe. As Hermes said, the planets permeate our nerves and marrow, our veins, our arteries, and even our innermost organs. We are one living system. And here is our cosmic connection. We are, again, if we look at that phi ratio, the logos is what some people call it, we're really looking at these same structures, these same patterns are everywhere. And we're talking about ether. And they say it's empty. Well, no, it's not empty. If you look at it, it's firing on all cylinders all the time, no different than our brains. So if we look at some of the principles of Hermes, one of them is it's all mind. That's why it's fundamental and it's elemental. And we look at what is ether. And from what I get is the Bible and everything says it's a finer form of the other. They've separated the waters. So what I did here is I took the color out, and you can basically see that water carries charge, and our universe carries charge. So if you think that they call it, and they always talk about the Higgs boson, it's always in something that's, water-like. Well, water-like? Well, why don't we just call it what it is, a finer form of the other. It's carrying charge. It's part of who and what we are. That field carries the same structures, again, from our DNA to our cells to things like our eyes. And I like what Kepler said. I believe geometric proportions serve the Creator as an idea when he introduced continuous generation of self-similar objects. Again, we look at the time travel, we look at vortices, we look at how things move through time and space. And when I look at that, I think of its particles of light, of whirlwinds of energies. We get caught in eddies for a period of time. We're just like particles of sand coming in and out of whether you want to call it a black hole or a white hole. We're coming through something that captivates us for a time when we get stuck in an eddy and we come out. We've done that story. It's time for the next. When we look at, this is the work of Dr. Mihail Lechwick. This is his Torsian vortexes, as he calls them. And you can see this is still a vortex of what he calls spirits of light. So wormholes, black holes, you can call them whatever you want. They're funnels in which life ebbs and flows through time and space. So again, a lot of people say we're light beings. I say we're light being. We're being particles of that whole tapestry. And we are black holes wandering in space. We have that field effect, which I'll show you more about. But this is basically, you can see that everything is fractal in nature. And we are life without ends. There's, as they say, many galaxies or many homes. Come to my many homes. So you are the universe manifest in physical form. And I love that. So when you begin to look at all of the things, we are an electric body. We live in an electric magnetic universe that pulses and it fields through us, showing us what we all are. So we are again part of that human connection to that. And I love this part. Science, take heart. Our matters matter to us. There we go. And again, we are the universal man. This is Hildegard von Bingen from the 13th century. And the ancients understood that the heavens and the earth were one living organism. We are systems within systems affecting each other with our waves and our sound. Hence why Dave said, who's going to be your prop on the stage? And I said, you, creating the sound of the universe as we're sitting here playing. So again, we are celestial bodies. This is from the, just so you know, this is from the NASA website. There's a crown that actually comes from the Earth, crowns that come from the rest of the galaxies, the planets. So if you think it's, we're all human to planets, celestial bodies, having a plasmic fountain. This is my friend Krishna Madhapa, and he works with a system with Konstantin Kortagov where they have what they call a GDV system, and they can actually measure the light essence of different things. So what you're seeing here in the big picture is a tulip. So here's the difference when we send love or don't send love. So love is truly radiant. Love does light us up. Love is the reason to be. And you can see the charge. So that's Konstantin's work and Krishna's work. They have here, where you can see, here's where you're on neutral. Look at the discharge system all around. This is when the person was angry, and this is when they got back to a more love state. And you wonder, does hands-on healing work? if all we're looking at is particles of light in the wave, then what we're basically sending within what we're constructed with is radiant energy. What do we eat? Food. Why do we eat it? Because it has radiant energy. That's all that we're doing. We're going to take the woo-woo out of this for you, because that's all that's happening in this field of existence. We are humans having a human experience. We are but bit players on the light's array. When you look at us from the electromagnetic spectrum, you can see that we're crystallizing from light to particles to solidifying in form. So we are, again, that water, which is the medium and the matrix that makes us, into the imaging machine that we have, this holographic imaging machine we've been getting. We're going to go back to threes here for a second, because we got the three colors, the three primary colors that make all of the images that we see in we have our third eye, and then we imagine. So again, 3 rods and cones. I think God likes threes. So we are mindkind, a wave function collapsing of intention into reality. Harmonics of all sorts follow geometric patterns that design and shape us. These patterns are expressed in mathematical formulas and regulate the golden ratio and the sacred geometry that we see in all life. That is my friend Jean. And here we are. How does that matrix happen in your mind? I love this one. I had this aha. There's the spinning wheel, or the wheel of color of light that we all see. Again, you have the cones coming into that vortex, coming out with that same principle, making a field of information. There again, particles of light in the wave, and holograms and interferons are the process of crystallizing light into mass elemental matter. This is the work of Bill Tiller, showing you how it spins and how we actually begin to make things matter in our minds. The one thing that came to me as I was doing one of the issues, I was working with Richard Merrick, and we were talking about the Venus Blueprint, a book of his, but also how Venus made the shape of the 5. And then he was telling me how all of these people who had done ayahuasca and LSD and all this stuff were having these epiphanies of how God creates whatever God creates. And then I realized that in the 60s and 70s, everybody was having these trips and drawing paisleys. And then it dawned on me, well, the paisleys are basically our fractal universe. So what they had done is crossed over into their own gateway, understanding the nature. In the ancient times, what they did is they would go into places like this. This is my understanding from the work of Freddie Silva, who just did a book on resurrection. And what he discovered through doing the resurrection was that they would go and do these ceremonies and go through the mystery schools, and when they could get to the point where they could induce themselves a near-death experience, the trick was not crossing over and not coming back. The trick was to go to the other side to know what the universe was made of. I know this lady by the name of Lynn Claire, who's done her books on the Marian Matrix, had a near-death experience, came over with a complete understanding. She did a 600-page book with nothing but a bunch of scientists doing knot theories and basically understanding the entire elemental nature. It's very dense, but it's a very good book. So what we've done here is just to give you an idea that they knew this then. They had the technology. This is in Egypt. This is in China. This is where they were all across the world. And they seem to have the same flying ships all across the world. They must have had frequent flyer miles because they seem to have gotten around. They understood the idea of crossing over. And there seemed to have been some sort of one kind of cosmic understanding. You can see that when you look at the nature of water and patterns and matrix of how we generate life itself, when you actually understand what we're looking at as a kaleidoscope of life. We're looking at different prisms and different mathematical structures actually showing up in forms, and every religion had it. That no one had one sacred something that the other one didn't have. There was a time when they all had that understanding. Again, this is what in the Muslim religion is the breath of God. How can you describe it? Well, you can't, because God isn't everywhere and God isn't everything. This is based on the work of Don Estes. And Don Estes realized he took a 12 toroidal structure, created something called the porticle that you can speak to, and it actually speaks back to you, and it actually sometimes corrects your thoughts and tells you what's real and what's intentional. But by doing that, I realized that we were basically geometry and motions, and our words actually go out into the field with our breath. And he shows us here that this is the neutral. This is what it looks like when you breathe out. This is what it looks like when you breathe in. Again, it's the same pattern over and over again. You see it in the universe as a breath, and you see it in the spirit of who and what we are. So all is sacred when you finally get this. This is the work of Dr. Kordakoff, showing you that when you die, the gas in you, the breath in you, the air in you is literally leaving you. So you are the breath, the spirit of what you are. And you wonder how the word spreads. If we live in an ether-based, water-based atmosphere, then things spread by currents, airways, and waterways. Breath is your life form. So that way you can understand. When we look at Eastern traditions, they say, well, get a hold of the elemental aspects of you. So if you really look at the fundamental ways that we're actually created, you have to look at the pressure waves, the water waves in your brain and your body, which is 99.9% water, and your heart rates. And then people say, well, you're not electric. Really? How do we measure when we go to the hospital? Everything that we measure with is waves, on the electromagnetic spectrum. So when we talk about being with people, we're either in phase or out of phase or in sync or out of sync. And here's your idea here that go back to John Depew's work. There's two neutral. There's the sine and the cosine wave. Oops, I got ahead of myself. Sorry about that. And at the time when we go, I'm going to go here for a second. These are John Stuart Reid's work, where you can actually see the different states of your being recorded. What I thought was interesting, if you look at these two, one looks like they're imploding and exploding. One is breathing in, one's breathing out. It seems like there's a pattern in there. And again, we have a choice in life. And the reason in the ancients, what they did is they built buildings that had 3 entrances. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. It was to remind you that when you enter the temple of your mind, so you can alter and bridge to the divine, the neutral particle of matter is the center. You can have the choice of going left or going right or being centered at any point in time. Life is nothing but a choice of how we move particles in the wave. And this was part of the teachings of the mystery schools. When we talk about are we fixed or not, because everybody talks about your genes, I thought this was sort of humorous, is Bruce Lipton would say, we're not cell biologists, we're self-biologists. And how do we do that is we may have a blueprint when we come in, but how we fill those genes is really up to us. We have a choice in life. And when we look at how we bond to families and things, I thought we bond like atoms, we cluster into groups like particles, we arrange by sympathetic frequencies, our relationships evolve by chemistry, we bond, i.e. family and country, we basically live in bonded states. We're basically pure chemistry in motion. And this is something that when we look at the flower of life, it's the mathematical loom. The frequency is invertly related to wavelengths, and the magnetic scale behaves like motion, vibration, and rhythm. That's Clay Taylor. He's an understudy of John Depew. So when we look at how could these records and these crystalline forms, if you understand water is the medium and the matrix, then you have to understand that what happens here is these are when we look at ancient traditions, we look at Walter's work on the periodic table, and we look at the ancient astrology. We're basically going around a wheel of color, and I call it the wheel of fortune, because they basically said, arm yourself against the world, make sure your defense is strong so your world doesn't rob yourself of that. And having worked with so many kids, I think the problem that I see when we look at our educational system, we always look at everything by standards and norms. And the problem with that is we all have an individual fingerprint. We've all come here with something very special to do, to inquire about, to go look and investigate. That's what our nature is. And when we only say you can only do it one way, it's got to be the silliest thing that I have ever heard. I ran a school for gifted kids with learning differences. And the interesting part was when we did a question, we could have had 10 answers. And in a regular school, that would have never been tolerated. It would have been, I'm sorry, you didn't get the right answer, but all of them were right in a very different way. And it was a beautiful thing to see that there was so many innovative minds looking at things from many different cross points. So there again, it's the language of light. This is the work of Dale Pond, showing it in the colors. This is Marco Rodin's work, and I love the abracadabra, because you think about it, if it's all light, then words have a spell, and abracadabra used to mean I am what I speak. And when you start looking at the crystallized nature of water, and when we speak, we solidify our lives by the words we speak, and we send them out into the field, it becomes much more potent in our understanding. Again, we're waves of information. We live in a frequency-based universe, and that means that it runs through our own currents and our own bodies, and the ancients knew it. This is, again, the wave function showing you when you're in or out of a line, particles in the wave. There's the idea that how could color heal? Well, if it's all part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's all part of just one way of looking at it, whether it's color or sound, then there was this work by Danush, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but showed in the ancient times, not so ancient, in the 30s, that color, this person was burned, and after 18 months, this was the healing. We look at shades of emotion, which are here. We're all on that wheel. Our foods are full based on their color, on what we eat, or the vibrational energies that we take in. And then we look at the whole idea of our electric universe, electric charge on the electromagnetic spectrum. These are branches of light. Here's your tree. This is water. This is your electric universe, and here's your electric body. Again, you'll see these nothing but fractal patterns on this electrical discharge system that fires through your body. You can see it from leaves. You can see it in the water. You can see it on the earth. It permeates everything. It's the waterways for life's force energy to flow. Again, you'll see its particles of electric energy flowing in rivers of water. They are not separate. They always kind of come together, or you'll find that without one or the other, there's no life. This is water. Water acts like a charged battery. That's by Gerald Pollack in his book, The Fourth Phase of Water. And don't forget, batteries have to have water to run. And this is all pictures of water. In a nutshell, the water in each of your cells archives its order structure for energy to obtain from the environment. So basically, we're getting all of our energy from the electromagnetic spectrum or the infrared heat. It was said earlier today, everything has a field of energy around it. We have a way of mimicking nature's design. So our energy batteries have that flow, have that vortex, Satorian vortex. But we have to remember there's a positive and negative flow. There's an in and an out breath. And again, you're still getting that vortex structure no matter what. We are nothing but solar cells running on solar energy. The ancients seemed to know that. That's what the halo was all about. It was the soul, the halo within the enlightened one. We all flow within a life's rhythm. We all have many faces and phases. We all flare up from time to time, yet no matter what, it always seems to affect our electrical nervous system. This may sound loony, but it's designed into every living system. Again, when somebody talked about the Schumann resonance, when they actually went up to space with the astronauts in the beginning, they realized that they were completely disoriented without the Schumann frequency. I think everybody wants to go off planet and do something bigger or better, they think, but we have been given something so remarkable here to live in if we could just take care of it in a way that could be. This is our ground of being. And when we look at an electromagnetic universe, that word grounded is literally an electrical term, and it's literal. Sometimes we don't take them that way. Again, what I think is beautiful by the work of Stuart Mitchell and Mark Rossi, they're doing a new book. And you'll see that our sound of existence exists within these 62 miles because this is our sound, our canvas for sound. And there is no sound that exists beyond it. The perception of sound stops at the sound molecules begin to dissipate because of the lack of molecules being present in the atmosphere to collide to produce it. So again, we've been given a beautiful earth in which to experience our ground of being. And that's why we have polarities. There is the law of Hermes, is also electric. All the 7 principles, if you look at them, are. There's the male and the female. You can't have one without the other. And when you look at why, this is the harmonic interference theory by Richard Merrick, and he shows you how the wave functions create both hemispheres, both sides of the of what we see in life. So you need the sine, the cosine, you have, there you go. And when you begin to look at all of the different properties that we may not think about, that's your gas and your air, that's your particles of waves. Still, all of these are particles. That's your the Higgs boson, not the Higgs boson. Yeah, to the particle. They say, is there particles or is it wave? Well, obviously it's both. There's particles and waves and particles and waves, and they move in the circular particles dancing in the wave. That's what they are. This is Jupiter, and this is actually water. So you can see the same principles happening in everything. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. These are all part of the way that all of those nature and all of the elements dance together on a continuum. We talked about the egg function. This is Victor Scheiberger's work, and you can see how down here these elements are twisting through, generating and creating. So here's again that phi ratio and how it spins this way. It's the same as a sound wave. It's the same as your DNA. What I think is interesting is some people say, well, we don't know how water moves. Well, it's basically on the electromagnetic going plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. Here's your wave. We just don't see it that way. That's the currents in the air, and that's the currents on our coastline. So that's why Victor Scheiberger would say we are living with water. Water is a living substance. And if we don't think that the fractal patterns are repeating themselves, and when we think as humans that we're so completely special, I'd like to say think again, because if it's all God and it's all source, then we can see here that these fractal patterns show up in every way. And when we look here, here's an apple, and here's the woman's uterus and that. It's actually how life seeds itself, how, again, that prism spins and generates the electromagnetic and the electrical discharge patterns. Nature does as little as possible with what it's got, as Kepler says, right? Oops, go back. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, then you can still see the structures again from the very elemental aspects from the skin is what makes us different, the air we breathe and how we are rooted. Self-similar patterns. There's a seed of intelligence in everything, and so we always say, what's our purpose? I think we're here as creation. We're here as creators, here to explore. He who experiences the unity of life sees his own self in all being and all beings in his own self, and look at everything with impartial eyes, because we're all seated some way to do something and to experience something in a particular way. Okay. Again, and I love the other part of the fractal nature is this. In every sum of the whole is its part. And you can see your hands tell your story, your ears tell your story, your feet tell your story, your chart tells your story, your eyes tell your story. And I did a whole issue on the sum and the whole and the parts and what tells you. So you can go to Science to Sage magazine, the whole issue just on 20 more of the examples of how the sum and the whole and the part. And then there's form and there's function in nature. It does such an amazing job doing what it should be doing, as long as we don't, again, re-engineer it. The walnut is great for the brain, and the avocado is great for the wound. The people who discovered that were the Chinese, and you can go to Chinese medicine and look at certain foods, and they'll just tell you, like the tomatoes for the heart, and the thing goes on. We mimic nature's designs basically everywhere. And then there's our inner technology. We all think that everything happens outside of ourselves, but it doesn't. We are a sense station. And I think what surprised me when I was looking to doing the book that I'm doing, is that all of our systems are electric, from our eyes to our taste to our nose. And I like what Russell Walter says, because we often think the brain is it, but I think it works more like a computer. It's wired to fire. It's wired for survival, stimulus response, gateways, closes, wired to connects, store, retrieval, create. It's a binary system. It alerts you for danger. And so I think it's there to receive. It's part of like a cat with its scent system. But it's not necessarily the most intelligent part, because it's basically geared for us to survive. So when we look at, again, go back to the elements, we have basically something that's firing, particles dancing, coming alive, in a watery substance. So we are firing on all cylinders, or we are burned out. So when we look again, we're talking about the elements within ourselves and how we deal with them. And I think the reason the ancients said your brain kind of gives you downloads. It's there to remember patterns, what's safe, what's not. But sometimes we need to break out of patterns. And when we need to do that, we need to go to our heart. And the heart is 500 times more powerful than the brain. That's why love is so potent. And why, when it doesn't happen, why it hurts so bad. Because it's so meaningful to how we do an override for the brain. Sometimes we just have to step out of the comfort zone and get out of the same rut and the same route. That's why when we look at what happens, we've had the word electropesio effect. What happens is we literally get shocked to the bone, and we get fused to the bone with our illnesses. Dr. Joe Dispenza would say, somebody who works with people working with their minds to alter them, you almost have to have the same other shock factor to get you out of it. But we're basically being charged and shocked. So I always say this, when I know I'm in a situation that I'm not necessarily happy with, I always feel this charge and rush going through my body. And when I know that, I realize that there's something I either need to learn, witness, or be attention to. Because when I don't care and when I'm neutral, nothing really matters. So if we look at those currents that we looked about, the left, right, and the center, when you're centered, you're fine. When you're off kilter one way or the other, there's something you're experiencing, good or bad. It's a way for you to register within yourself, pay attention. And then we go to the sixth sense. Why is that so woo-woo? And the reason I think it's funny is when we look at the sixth sense, we live on an electromagnetic spectrum. We live in a sea of currents and waves. That means from outer space to our inner space. And some people are gifted with being able to dial into channels that are a little bit higher, or dial up or dial down. We do that with our sonic equipment in outer space. We do it with equipment when we take submarines to down below. So if you wonder why things happen that way, it shouldn't. It's a natural part of the way we live and function, not in a closed system like we think here, but in an open system where, like Tesla said, the reason we got our cell phones today is when his mother passed on, he was still talking to her. So he knew there was something more. So he basically dialed into how wide is your bandwidth. I'll call it our own wireless network. And the way the ancients did it is the human technology. The human temple was the human template for how we actually exist. Again, the stones, and they were made into the proportions so that you could go in and enter an ancient temple. Is to enter oneself, was to know oneself. They used to actually use the ancient medicines to actually take you into space. So when you go to the Catholic Church, you'll see the little green vineman. People used in many different places, like if it was in India, it was soma. When it's in South America, it would be ayahuasca. What they used in whatever, but they used to use the fruit of the vine, they used to put the temperatures right, they used to do the music to help you transcend and alter. Those words didn't come from nowhere. So that goes back to my idea when it comes to educating children. We are not all created equal. We all have different pathways of how we learn, whether we're more audio, visual, or sensory. And sometimes not all the systems are working at the same time. And like a computer, what I found with a lot of really gifted kids is that what they would call processing speed was slower. But it was because they were putting more data into their brain, and they had a harder time processing and filtering all the extraneous because they couldn't. And so their computer would go down or go off, what I call offline. And what happened is they would be called ADD. And oftentimes what they just needed was a little more time to filter all the stuff that they were doing. So I think we're doing too much to children to alter them. And sometimes working with a lot of guys, a lot of little boys, you guys need to get out and play and do more hands-on work. So that's my passion. My heart went out. So we're going to go back to the idea of just kind of summarizing, what does form and function do? Why do these form? So when we look at shapes, and you look at these ancients, I want you to go back and look at the triangle, the prism, the sun, the radiant energy, the balancing, the equal. And you'll begin to see that these forms are everywhere. So here is the idea. If we could see a miracle of a single flower, clearly our whole life would change. You can see the sum and the whole. And there was a time when there was one story. It was very clear to me looking as I did my research. This is from across the globe. I don't know what it quite was, or if it did really look like that. Maybe those were the dragons of way back when. But when we look to the pattern of 2, matter is the Latin word for mother, which gives rise to matter, and pater is the Latin word for father, which gives rise to pattern. So what we're really looking at is the marriage of matter and patter. It creates pattern and matter. So again, why we need the duality, it's not really because you just need both sides of the spin in order to create and generate life. Creation stories, there's your DNA. It seemed to be raptured and captured, and they seem to manage to love the DNA. When we look at the elements of 3, we're still looking back at the fundamental elements that create. I consider space and earth the places of ground, or that we come from heaven to earth. Again, the Vesica Pisces, to me, is the portal for light and life. If you look at it, it's how we see, it's how we give birth. And when we look at the elements and the states of matter, and we look at it from ancient wisdom to modern science, we're looking at fire as plasma, water as liquid, earth as solid, and air as gases. So we're basically talking about the same fundamental forces, just talking in different kind of language. But it's the same thing. How we spin around the galaxy, how we spin around, whether it's the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, those are the electromagnetic spectrums as far as I'm concerned when I see the 4 quadrants, because that's how it kind of flows in that torus field. And those are the elements. We have man, winter, air, gas, spring, earth, solids, summer, fire, plasma. These are still elemental parts of earth, eagles fall. But here's the interesting thing here. Here's the Babylonians, and there's the Catholic Church. And I want you to see this gentleman's hands right here. That's what I would call a mudra. In the East, that would be how you activate energy systems. So they actually got along. They seem to get along. So the 5-fold nature is our 5 earthly senses, our 5-fold nature, how harmonics spins out life itself is in the 5th. And when we look at the conductive design, you will see that water holds it. When you're born in your mother's womb, it's hexagonal in shape because it's the perfect shape to birth you. It's what the bees do. It's what your mom does. It's what your electric wiring is, your DNA structure. So it's 6, to me, is a conductive design. When you look at this, that was the Merkaba body, was your light body. That's what turns you on. That's what gets you activated and going, is the electrical currents that run through your system. 7 is a maturation point. You can see it pretty much, whether it's the 7 celestial bodies, the organs, the colors of the rainbow, the musical notes, the embryo, the stages. It goes on, and they seem to have understood that, whether it's in the music, whether it's the understanding of the 7-fold nature of the universe. We do it in degrees. Everything is about degrees and maturation. So it says 8, as I always love it, it's the chessboard of life. It's when you have to sort of calculate your every moves and look at what you've created in the course of all those patterns of your growing in your different stages of life. And I'm wondering, if we look at here, what's been part of our fate. So you can look at the Christian religion, the mosque, Santa Barbara to India, and there are chariots of fire. And they basically said they came down. And that's in the Bible, it's in the Vedas, it's in all the old cultures. So if we look at the universe as a vibrational organism, we cannot be the only thing. We actually live in the boondocks of the universe. So we can't be living alone, but maybe they did come, and maybe they did come to fight for what it is that we had, these precious minerals. And then we go to the completion. I love this one. Marco's speaking tomorrow, and here's his electric circuit. This is the circuit. You see the symmetry to it. What I love here is the idea of 9. This is Anthony Morris's work, where if you look across here, it makes 9, makes 9, makes 9, makes 9. So 9 seems to be, for this earthly plane, a completion of cycles. You can see it in plants as well. This is also what was talked about earlier, is the 3, 6, and 9. It goes back again with up and down waves, the waves of living, the waves of life. And these were the wielding plasma gods. They seem to have an understanding, these creator gods, of the electromagnetic motion. They have it here. They have it here. They are still holding. They're all holding the rod. And that's in every culture. It's on every continent again. So again, there seemed to be a point when there were some common roots. I want to point out here, there's another mudra. They seem to have gotten along, gotten around. So my question is to humanity, can we all get along? Can we find our common roots? Can we do something for the betterment of humanity so we can save this planet and stop the lunacy that we see destroying? I know we have the solutions. So by lifting the veil to all of this and realizing there is our own human technology, and when I show you that there are the three elements, when I look at the new science of what I see coming out, or old science, or how they used to get along, it's different through phase changes. When you look at heating and cooling systems, they're basically looking at hot and cold, and in the middle comes water, where you can actually tap water out of the atmosphere. You can make, there's Stan Meyer, who's done the electric car, who seemed to disappear too. But you know what? The system was the three basic things that we can do to actually create energy that's more perpetual in motion. So the question is, we've been given a garden. We've had a marvelous designer that has given us a perfect body to experience and sense our every thoughts, and for the pure joy of creating. We cohabitate on this beautiful place that we've been given. And are we going to either garden and weed it as needed, or are we going to die and see it wither from need? So I hope that we do something that we can recognize that we do. When we look at the stories that we tell each other, the stories from our religions, the stories to, oh, my, oh, whoa, whoa, I like to say there was a time when they said there were one people, and if they came together, is there something that we could do as a collective? So I know that there's people here who are looking for us to co-create, to co-do things, because collectively, there's nothing we can't do. It's we stay as individuals and say, this is mine, mine, mine. The truth is most of us know, who have actually done some work and done this, we know that we get inspired. We know we get downloads. We know that this is life's work. But we can't just say, I did it, because the truth is, everybody either gets it in a dream and an aha moment or something, because they've asked the question. This belongs to the universe. This does not belong to one person. But I like Mike Upstone's idea of how can we co-create and collaborate, because I still understand that we all need to eat. And so that's part of that. So by working together, I think that's the main story. We are all children of this cosmic web. The reason I asked the question when I was a kid was this: God did not create one flower. God didn't create one kind of people or one kind of tree. God is perfect in what he does. He just creates for the sheer joy of creating. And if we could just create this without our fear and with our heart and with the right intention, I think we can do things together that will make this planet, make the next generations to come, something that we can seed, something that's so much more beautiful. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Karen Elkins, David Enke. That was fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful visuals, and beautiful, beautiful words to go along with it and paint the picture of what we're trying to see here.